You know, for the longest time, the whole idea of the US government actually studying UFOs, that was pure sci-fi, right? Stuff for the movies. But that has totally changed. The conversation has literally moved from the fringe and gone mainstream, right into the halls of Congress and into the labs of top scientists. So how on earth did we get here? Well, the answer, maybe surprisingly, starts with the words we use. Okay, so the whole story really kicks off with language. Back in 1947, a pilot named Kenneth Arnold saw these objects moving like a saucer skipping across water. The media ran with it, and boom, flying saucers was born, and it stuck around for generations. Then, by the 50s, the Air Force tried to make it a little more clinical, calling them unidentified flying objects, or UFOs. But now, you're hearing this new term, UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. And believe me, that change wasn't just for show, it was a deliberate strategy to change the entire conversation. Yeah, this was no marketing gimmick. This was a calculated move, and it was encouraged by the Department of Defense itself. The whole point was to kind of take the tinfoil hat stigma away from the subject, you know? To get rid of the little green men baggage and make it a safe space for serious, sober, scientific investigation. It was basically a direct invitation for scientists to get back in the game. But, before we got to this new age of openness, there was this long period of the government just officially shutting the whole thing down. And for over 20 years, the government had one main public answer to the UFO question: Project Blue Book. So, from 47 all the way to 69, the U.S. Air Force ran this massive investigation, and they had a ton of data to go through. The program looked into a staggering 12,618 reports, from pilots, cops, regular people, making it the biggest official inquiry of its kind. And look, they explained away most of them: misidentified weather balloons, weird aircraft, that sort of thing. But there's this one number that just kept the mystery alive: 701. That's how many cases they just could not explain. They were officially stamped unidentified. That's a pretty big crack in the official story that never really went away. But despite those 701 stubborn cases, when Project Blue Book finally shut its doors in 1969, its final verdict was basically designed to be the last word on the subject. Period. The official line was no threat, no crazy advanced tech, and definitely no aliens. And for almost 50 years, that was the government's story, and they were sticking to it. But was that really the whole story? Well, it wasn't even close. Because while that public book was slammed shut, a whole new secret chapter was just getting started. Because as it turns out, the government never really stopped looking. Then in 2017, we get this bombshell report from the New York Times revealing that the Pentagon had been secretly funding a brand new program this whole time. Now, that bombshell article called the program AATIP, but we've learned a lot since then from insiders, including the program director himself, James Lakatsky, that the real story was actually deeper and even more secret than we thought. The actual program, the one that really kicked off this whole modern conversation, was called AATIP, and this was a hush-hush $22 million project run by the Defense Intelligence Agency. Its job? To investigate the potential threat from UAPs. The fact that it even existed proved the government's interest was serious, it was well-funded, and it was happening completely behind the scenes. And this revelation, it didn't just crack the door open for the government to be more transparent, it basically kicked it off its hinges for mainstream science. It was the start of a whole new ballgame, bringing a new level of rigor to this mystery. See, for scientists, the biggest problem has always been the data. Eyewitness stories are fascinating, but they're tricky. Our brains are basically uncalibrated sensors. We're easily fooled, we misinterpret things. A scientist needs more than just a good story. They need cold, hard, repeatable data. And this, right here, is the heart of the new scientific approach. It's a huge shift, right? We're moving away from subjective, tough-to-verify human stories and moving towards systematic, calibrated data from multiple sensors. We're talking radar, infrared, optical, data that can be checked, rechecked, and, most importantly, tested. So, okay, with this new push for way better data, scientists can finally do something they really couldn't do before. They can move past just collecting weird stories and start building actual, testable, scientific hypotheses about what these things might be. And these hypotheses, they're not just pulled out of thin air. They're built around 5 key characteristics that keep popping up in reports from really credible people, like the Navy pilots from that famous 2004 Nimitz incident. They call them the 5 observables.
Ridiculous instant acceleration, no visible engines or propulsion, flying at hypersonic speeds without a sonic boom, being able to move seamlessly from the air into the water, and this weird low observability. Any decent theory has to try and explain these things.
So to get their heads around this, scientists are creating what they call toy models. And no, that doesn't mean they're playing around. These are serious, simplified ideas that you can actually test. It's all about shifting the question from, is it aliens, to something much more scientific. Like, okay, if a phenomenon were X, what specific evidence would we look for to prove or disprove it? Okay, so for a really out there but super interesting example, you have something called the neurointerface probe hypothesis. It's a serious scientific attempt to try and explain that strange gap between what our fancy sensors pick up and what a person actually experiences. And here's the brilliant part. It doesn't even matter if it's true. What matters is that it makes specific predictions you can test. It takes the whole subject out of the realm of just pure speculation and puts it firmly into the world of real, testable science. So, where does all this leave us? We've gone all the way from people laughing at flying saucers to secret Pentagon programs, and now we're at the cutting edge of real, hypothesis-driven science. We have new tools, we're getting more data, and scientists are finally willing to take this on. So the big question isn't, are we going to find answers anymore? It's, what are those answers going to be? For the first time in over 70 years, the scientific community isn't just shrugging this off. They're aiming their best instruments right at the heart of the mystery.